one, and you can start casting.
Just checking we're live. Yes, we're live.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Are we ready to go?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to this afternoon's virtual Joint Employee Council, hosted by Bassetlaw District Council. Following the outbreak of COVID-19, new legislation was approved to enable councils to hold virtual meetings rather than requiring members to be present in the committee chamber when making a decision. This keeps everyone safe by maintaining social distancing and allows business to be conducted in an appropriate manner. It's very important that councillors can hear each other, so I will invite members to introduce themselves and in doing so, test their broadband connection. So starting with Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
Present, Chair.
Councillor June Evans, who's Vice Chair of this committee.
Present, Chair.
Councillor David Pidwell.
Present, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Michael Quigley. Have we had apologies from Councillor Quigley?
We have, Chair.
Right, thank you. Councillor Joan Sanger
Present, Chair.
and Councillor Joe White.
We're still trying to get hold of Councillor White, Chair.
Okay, thank you, James. And there are also a number of employee representatives present. I'm Keith Circuit, I'm Chair of the committee. And now Mel Bassett.
Present, Chair.
Philip Lee.
We're still trying to get hold of Philip Lee, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Russell Parr.
We haven't heard anything from Russell Parr.
I have a feeling he may not be attending, but we'll just see if he does in the next few minutes. Trudy Walstow.
Yes, present, Chair.
And Jim Worley.
Present, Chair. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Jim. Are you?
Not so bad.
Good. And we have a number of officers in attendance at this afternoon's meeting. Karen Childs, Head of People and Culture.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Afternoon, Karen. Cheryl French, HR Business Partner.
Present, Chair.
Helen Hinsley, Meeting Facilitator.
Present, Chair.
And James Lavender, Committee Clerk.
Present, Chair, and I'd like to inform you that Philip Lee has now joined the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Philip. Welcome to the meeting. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Good.
Right, if a number of members lose connection and the meeting becomes in quorum or the live streaming for public viewing fails, I will adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to allow connection to be re-established. Given that this is a virtual meeting, there is no corporate responsibility to detail a fire procedure. However, I would like to highlight that this committee is being live streamed on social media. So all participants, please be aware of your actions and take appropriate safety precautions from your place of live streaming. Members, may I please remind you to switch off your microphones when not speaking. Agenda item 1 is apologies. Are there any apologies, please?
So, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Quigley and apologies from Jean Common. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is to receive declarations of interest by members and officers. Do we have any of those declarations of interest, please?
We have not received any declarations of interest from members or officers, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. If during the meeting a member realises that they have an interest, please disclose this as soon as possible. So moving on to the agenda, item 3 is minutes of the meeting held on 13th of January 2021, which is on pages 5 to 8 of your agenda. Do all members agree that they represent an accurate record?
Yes. Yeah.
Does anyone wish to vote against or abstain from voting? Right, thank you. The minutes are therefore approved, and we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is minutes for action and implementation. This is on page 9 of your agenda. And that is review of agency workers, which is on today's agenda. The previous one, the report was noted, and there's another item on today's agenda. So, excuse me, which will be addressed at agenda item 7B. Agenda item number 5 is the outstanding minutes list, which is page 11 of your agenda. And there are none. So moving to agenda item 6, which is an update on progress of the People Strategy Action Plan, pages 13 to 20 of your agenda. And is that Karen to present the report?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen.
Yes, the purpose of this report is to update on progress against the actions identified in the action plan that accompanies the People Strategy. And members will recollect that People Strategy was considered at the last meeting of JEC. It's since travelled on and been approved at Cabinet on the 11th of February. And the People Strategy itself sets out 8 objectives or aspirations for the council staff, which have been informed by surveys and feedback via different mechanisms on what's important for the council staff. So those 8 objectives appear on page 13 of the report. It's got a large focus on well-being, but also looking at opportunities for development and linking that to workforce and succession planning, so that we can be clear about what staff want in terms of development and how that links into planning to ensure that we've got the appropriate resources to deliver services that are important to the customer. And that is one of the other aspects of the People Strategy that underpins it, which is looking at what's important to the customer and ensuring that we're delivering that. And in so doing, therefore, we're enhancing also the employee experience by being able to deliver a positive experience to our customers. So we identified a number of actions to look at this year and deliver, which will help us to achieve the objectives set out on page 13. And you may recollect there was an action plan setting out actions for now, for next and for later. This update report focuses on the actions that we identified for now, i.e. for this first year of the plan. And attached to this report is that update table, which I'll come to in a minute. I just wanted to also advise members of the JEC on an update following the verbal report that a proposal was to be put to Cabinet in February for an additional day's wellbeing leave in recognition of all the hard work that the council staff have done to respond to the pandemic. And that proposal was approved by Cabinet and is being implemented now. So turning to the action plan, as I say, this action plan was approved in February, but nevertheless we have made quite good progress against some of the actions already. So the first one that we've made progress on is the domestic abuse policy statement, and that's on the agenda for later in this meeting. In terms of promotion of health and wellbeing initiatives, we have developed a health and wellbeing guide already with tips on how to stay healthy. That focuses on both physical and mental health, and it provides a lot of links to resources online as well. So that's progress that we've made so far. That doesn't mean that that's the end of that one, but that's just what we've done so far. In terms of promoting support stop smoking, we've had a couple of promotional activities which are listed on the action plan. The annual leave purchase scheme, which is obviously intended to ensure a good work-life balance and some flexibility for staff in what is a priority for them in any given year. We've promoted that, and that's led to 25 employees choosing to purchase additional annual leave. We'll promote it again later in the year because there's a second opportunity at the 6 months point to purchase leave for the rest of the year. In terms of staff surveys, we're just preparing a staff survey to gauge opinions regarding the current flexible arrangements that we have in place during the pandemic, and also about flexi time. So that's due to go out very shortly. One of the things that we are very definitely wanting to do is to understand what is important to staff. So we started this process by doing a number of surveys, and as I say, that's shaped the 8 objectives. But we also want to know, now we have those objectives, how do we achieve them, and ask staff what's important to them in achieving them. So as part of that, we are just putting these documents into the corporate style, and the comms team have worked very hard on that, and they're with the unions now for consideration of what that style looks like and how it conveys the right messages. And as part of that, flashcards have been developed with the aim that people that don't sit at a computer all day will still be able to access what's important in terms of the actions that we're committed to delivering this year, and they're invited as part of those flashcards to let us have their thoughts and ideas about what's important for future years. So again, when they're ready, we'll be issuing those to staff so that everybody can see what's happening and has the opportunity to feed in. Point 4 then, staff feel empowered and trusted, clear about their role and how this relates to the council's priorities. So at the recruitment stage, we want people to be clear about the role that they're applying for, and also that they have a positive experience, and that we start that working relationship on the right footing. We're just developing an e-recruitment portal which aims to make for a slicker application process. That's nearing completion, and separately to the formal JEC, I can arrange for a demonstration of that if that would be of interest to members of the JEC. In terms of training to enable managers to have honest and meaningful conversations, we've got training scheduled for April. And I've asked that includes training on how to respond where there are issues of domestic abuse, because obviously we've got the policy later on. Remote working, we've developed proposals for hybrid working arrangements. So as we come out of lockdown at a national level, we'll be looking to have a combined approach where there's some working from home and some office-based working to take advantage of the benefits that come with team working and sitting alongside colleagues, etc. So we're looking at those now, and we actually have a meeting on Friday with senior managers just to go through some of the options there. review the policy on flexi time. That is in progress. It has been in progress for some time, but it was paused during COVID. Now we're in a different situation, so that's perhaps fortuitous. And as I said earlier, staff are going to be surveyed for their opinions on what works for them. Vanguard is the review of how we do things from the customer's perspective. We've got a programme board set up to monitor the projects that are ongoing at the moment. Regular monthly meetings are taking place to do that, and we've got 6 specific projects underway. And you can see on the action plan on page 19 what areas that's looking at. And then finally, introduce an integrated learning management system. Again, that's very much nearing completion, and that's another area that I can arrange for a demonstration if that would be of interest to members. So that's a quick tour through the progress to date, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Very comprehensive report on what I feel is a very good strategy. So members will now be offered the opportunity to comment and ask questions, and I will move around them in order. I will then ask if there are any further comments or questions from employee representatives. So starting with Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
Hi, Chair. Yes, I would like the extra information that Karen's saying she could put forward to us with regards to the way the council's moving forward with this policy.
Thank you. I'm sure we can arrange that. I'd like to see that as well. Councillor June Evans.
I think it's excellent, everybody, and I really support the involvement of the staff. I just hope that they do get involved and do make the comments known. That's all.
Thank you, and I think you're correct. It needs involvement from everybody. Councillor David Pidwell.
Well, thank you. I mean, I would echo what Councillor Entwistle said and ask for some further information, please. And I think congratulations that despite lockdown, you managed to promote, have the no smoking day back in March. So congratulations on going ahead with that when it would have been easy to have cancelled it.
Thank you. Councillor Joan Sanger.
No, I think it's all great. I think they've really cracked on with lots of things. And I hope, as June said, Councillor Evans said, I hope the staff will, join in and give any other questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did we manage to get contact with Councillor White?
We've tried, Chair, but not heard anything from her.
Okay. Thank you. So are there any questions or comments from employee representatives? I'm Keith Circuit. I was very heavily involved in the production of the document, and I agree with all the comments that have been said that everyone needs to join in and take part for it to be a success, but I hope it will be. Mel Bassett?
Sorry, no, nothing from me, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Philip Lee?
No, nothing from me neither, Chair.
Thank you. Trudy Walstow?
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Jim Worley?
I'd just like to make a comment about things going in the right direction and say thank you to management for the additional days leave for the COVID contributions. I think it's been really, really well appreciated, well received, and look forward to this moving on in the future.
Absolutely, I echo that comment. It's been well received, well appreciated, and well deserved, I think. So thanks to everybody for that. I will now move to the recommendation on page 15, which is to note the contents of the update report and attachment. Does anybody wish to vote against or abstain?
No.
In that case, the recommendation is approved. Agenda item number 6B is the domestic abuse policy, which is on pages 21 to 30 of your agenda. And I'm not sure, is that Karen or Cheryl that will be presenting this policy?
Yes, that's myself, Chair.
Thank you, Karen.
I've invited Cheryl to come to observe, partly for just to experience the JC, but also because she worked heavily on this policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the purpose of this report then is to propose a new domestic abuse policy applicable specifically to employees. And we currently don't have a domestic abuse policy at all, so this is a completely new one. You may be aware that the council does a lot of work on domestic abuse that's outward facing, and particularly given what's happened with COVID and people working more at home, we thought it was appropriate to bring this forward now. At point 3.2, there are some statistics about domestic abuse, which I think underpin and underline the importance of having something in place. And the purpose of this really is to ensure that if somebody is experiencing domestic abuse, that they have a framework within which they can raise issues and know that the council will respond in the right way. It also ensures that managers understand their role in this and the limitations of their role, because importantly, it's not for the manager to try and solve any issues, but to act more as somebody that can put pragmatic arrangements in place to assist somebody at work, such as providing a space for them to make contact with agencies that can provide professional support and help and guidance, and making sure that if there are any threats that come into the workplace, that action is taken to protect employees. And so that's the type of pragmatic support that we can reasonably expect managers to be able to put in place, but not to provide the sort of specialist advice and counselling, only to signpost people to the right sources so that they can access the help that they might need. This policy also considers the situation from the point of view of the perpetrator as well, and what that might mean should one of our employees be a perpetrator of domestic violence. So it sets out that there is support available, which may help people to address their behaviour, but ultimately that there may be implications for their employment, because the priority must be to protect any survivor of domestic violence. So that's a summary of the purpose of this policy, and the detail is attached in the form of the policy itself. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Karen. I will now, once again, members will now be offered the opportunity to comment or ask questions, and I will move around them in the same order. And that will be followed by any comments or questions from the employee representatives. Councillor Cliff Entwistle.
Just to say, well done, Chair, to Karen for bringing this forward. What a great move by the council again.
Thank you very much. Councillor June Evans.
Well, as somebody who in her professional life worked very closely with what was then known as the Wives Refuge in Doncaster, I can only applaud Bassetlaw District Council for setting up this policy. I just hope it does a little bit of good.
I'll echo those sentiments. Thank you. Councillor David Pidwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I would echo those sentiments as well. I would imagine that managers and staff generally find this a very helpful policy, dealing with an issue which can be very difficult to deal with, and this gives some clear steps and guidance on what to do. I do want to raise one issue though, and I have forewarned Karen of this, and on reflection, Chair, I should have copied you into the email as well. My apologies for that. But it concerns that the definition on page 25 at the end of the first paragraph, it gives some sort of examples of domestic violence, which are forced marriage, female genital mutilation, and so-called honour-based violence. Now, that is true, that they are examples, but I don't think they're particularly pertinent to the overwhelming white British population that we employ in the council. And it might give some perpetrators a false sense of security, because they can say, well, I don't do any of that, so I can't be a perpetrator. And it might also confuse the survivor or the recipient of domestic violence, because quite often survivors, when they give their own account later, haven't realised for many years that they were in fact being controlled and abused by a partner. So, I mean, I suggested to Karen that we might want to identify a few sort of behaviours that we white British are more apt at doing or deploying, you know, such as looking at people's email accounts, looking at your partner's email accounts, telling partners who they can go out with and who they can't go out with, not giving them access to a bank account, things like that. And I think that might sort of be a more appropriate, a culturally more appropriate message to give than the one we have at the moment. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to comment on that, Karen, please?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. I think we can certainly incorporate other examples that will resonate more with the staff base that we have. And we can use some of those examples provided by Councillor Pidwell.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I will also go along with that and support that. So thanks for raising it, Councillor. Moving on, Councillor Jones-Sanger.
No, I'd just like to say thank you to Karen and her team for producing the policy. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I assume that Councillor White is still not with us? And if that's correct.
That is correct, Chair.
Thanks, James. I will now ask for comments and questions of the employee representatives. I'm Keith Circuit. My comment, I think it's a policy that's necessary, welcome. I'll go along with the amendments that have just been suggested. And I think because of the COVID situation of the last 12 or 13 months, I think domestic abuse along with mental health issues are the two things that are really most worrying. So it's a very welcome policy. Mel Bassett?
No comments, thank you, Chair.
Philip Lee?
Fully support the policy and also some of the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Trudy Walstow?
Yes, Chair. Obviously, I welcome the policy as well, because I've worked with people fleeing domestic violence for years, and I've seen firsthand how difficult this can be and the impact this has on people's lives. What I just wanted to ask was there any plans to have domestic abuse awareness training for managers? Because clearly it is a minefield, and it is something that needs dealing with kid gloves, if you like. And it's not something that requires a bull in a china shop, no nonsense attitude. It needs a special sort of skill, shall we say, really. So I just wondered if there were any plans to roll out any kind of training for managers, because I realise some managers might be aware of domestic abuse and understand the impact of it and the forms that this takes, but others won't have had any experience at all.
Thank you, Trudy. It was something that was discussed as we were going through the policy. Would you like to add to that, Karen? I think you did mention something about manager training as part of a wider issue earlier on, but if you'd like to add, if you'd like to answer Trudy's question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a very good point. It is about skill in having these types of conversations and coming over in a supportive way, and that applies to a number of different types of situations. And so what we've decided to do is to pull it into the training that's taking place about managing challenging situations and conversations, because this is potentially a challenging matter for a manager to deal with, but the skills that are required are the same as for other challenging situations, and so I think if we had training specifically on domestic abuse, then you know, the period between somebody receiving that training and then having to deal with an issue, it might never happen, and so or it might happen but in years' time, and therefore I suppose the training wouldn't be any use at that point, because people would have forgotten it. You have to put training into use, don't you, in order for it to be embedded. And so we decided that the most appropriate thing would be to concentrate on the skills required, and leave the information to be said in the policy itself so that people can read it and pick it up that way.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that, you know, clearly dealing with a very difficult situation like this in a bad way can make the situation worse, because, you know, it takes an awful lot of bravery for someone to come forward and actually admit that they're a victim of domestic abuse, and if they feel that they're not being given empathy or not being treated in the way that they require, it could cause them to sort of, you know, retract and not seek further help for it. So my point is just, you know, this, I do, while I accept what Karen says, it is a challenging behaviour, but I do think that it's a behaviour like no other that requires a very certain skill to deal with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've got a domestic abuse coordinator within the council. So we've made mention of that role as somebody that people can go to, knowing that, you know, they're specifically set up to deliver that sort of support. But what we've also made clear in the policy is that it's absolutely at the employee's choice who they speak to. So if they go to speak to their manager, then it's for them to agree whether or not anybody else gets to find out about that, including HR. It's not a matter that should be reported to HR unless the person wants that intervention or they want some support from HR. So it's entirely within their control who they speak to. Equally, they could go to HR or they could go to their trade union, and we've made mention of that as well, which was a suggestion made by Councillor Evans. And I think people will take a view as to who they want to approach, who they think they will get support from. And the important thing is that when that approach is made, the person who's on the receiving end of that information agrees with that person what is going to happen next, so that there's no surprises, and it's treated in exactly the way that the employee wants.
Thanks, Karen. Is that okay, Trudy?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now to you, Jim Worley.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I'd just like to ask a question about disciplinaries. On page 30 of our document, it says that in certain circumstances, it may be appropriate to invoke the disciplinary procedure or to consider whether an employee can continue in their current role. blah, blah, blah. I was just wondering what kind of circumstances that those might be, because unfortunately, on occasion, especially in a relationship breakdown, it's not unusual for ex-partners to make unsubstantiated allegations about current members of staff, and we're aware of situations where that's happened. So I just wanted to be clear about that element of the policy.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Jim. Will you respond, Karen, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So, an example, I suppose, would be if there is a criminal case which leads to somebody being prosecuted, and it's brought into the workplace. I mean, we've already got our disciplinary rules which say that criminal convictions may lead to disciplinary action. So that's one example. We may have cases where we have the perpetrator and the survivor working together, which can't continue, in which case we might have to move somebody or consider whether or not it's still appropriate to keep them in that job. So the main point about this is that it's important that the employer behaves reasonably and it's not a knee-jerk reaction and putting somebody in a box with a label and saying you're the bad person. I think we've got to treat everybody as an individual, as a whole person, and not just consider and label them according to one aspect of their behaviour. But equally, we need to make sure that we are ensuring that staff are safe at work. And that we respond appropriately. Hopefully this will never come to have to be implemented. Yeah, but we've got to deal with each case on its own merits.
I hope that it's never implemented as well. But it's just, I know that how Keith distributes our disciplinary cases, and I would definitely pick that one up, I'm sure.
Whatever makes you think that. Is that response okay, Jim?
Yeah, no, it's better than okay. It's great. Thanks very much, Karen.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Before I move on to the recommendation, I'd just like to thank everybody that was involved in the coming together of that policy, especially Cheryl for all the hard work that went into it. It's a very good policy and well needed. So I now will move to the recommendation on page 23, which is to agree the proposed new domestic abuse policy is recommended to Cabinet for formal approval. Does anybody wish to vote against or abstain? All right, then the recommendation is approved. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to item number 7, which is section B, items for discussion in private. The live stream will shortly be stopped as we move to the confidential items. I would like to thank anyone who has been watching the live stream meeting. Can I please confirm that in accordance with Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and after considering the public interest test as set out by the officer in the body of the report, members agree that the following items of business involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 4, and therefore in accordance with section 100A of the Act, the press and public be excluded from the meeting. Are members happy with that course of action?
Yes.
I will take it as that everyone is. So I'm now going to ask for the live stream to be stopped, and can we have confirmation when that's been